Hey guys, how's it going? Today we're re-ranking every single Destiny dungeon in the game. We have 6 dungeons that have come out, and keep in mind, if you're watching this video, this is as of pre-Lightfall. So Season 19, before Lightfall, there are 6 dungeons we can choose from. If you're watching this a little bit after Lightfall, there might be more dungeons, so if you don't see them in this list, that's why. So let's go over the criteria I am ranking on. So the criteria is perceived length. So if a dungeon takes an hour, did it feel like it went by in an hour? Did it feel like it only went by in 30 minutes? Or did it feel like it went by in 2 hours? That sort of thing. The visual aesthetic, so if a dungeon looks very aesthetically pleasing to me, if I enjoy the aesthetic, then it will get some bonus points. How enjoyable was the solo flawless? If the solo flawless, I've done every single dungeon solo flawless, all 6 of them. How enjoyable was it? Was it a tedious grind? Did it only take a few attempts, or did it take me first try? That sort of thing. And then finally, probably the most important one is encounter diversity. If the encounters are just the same thing over and over and over again, it's probably going to get a lower score. But if an encounter is somewhat different than the previous encounter or something like that, then it will get a higher score, that sort of thing. So let's just jump right into the list. So coming out into the number 6 spot, this is the worst dungeon of all time, in my opinion. It's gotta be Duality. Now, Duality has a fun combat challenge, but there are so many glitches involved with this dungeon. I have solo flawed this. Let's put it this way. When I first solo flawless the dungeon, that was the first time a glitch didn't happen that ruined my run. And what I'm talking about is the bell glitches. The bell glitches are totally out of whack. They're crazy, they're out of control, and the fact that you had to pay extra money for this dungeon is quite insulting to me, honestly. The encounter design is not very inspiring. It's just shooting bells, going back and forth between the Nightmare Realm over and over and over again. And even when you're not in encounters, even when you're in jumping puzzles, it's still going back and forth between the Nightmare Realm. It's just not very inspiring. Visually, it's just kind of, Cabal ship and then just red. I've never really enjoyed the Cabal ship aesthetic in general. Just sort of the Leviathan, like the exterior of a Leviathan, or maybe some of the interior spaces in the raids, those were a little cool. But the general Cabal ship is probably one of my least favorite aesthetics in just all of Destiny. So that's why it gets kind of a really low score here. And also, just to add on top of it, this dungeon really slogs. I know it only takes maybe 45 minutes if you're running it pretty average, but it always feels like it just takes forever. You feel every minute that you spend in this dungeon, at least in my opinion. So yeah, Duality number 6. Coming out in the number 5 spot, we have Prophecy. Now, Prophecy will probably, if I was just going on visuals alone, this would be the number 1 spot, obviously. But it's not very inspiring mechanically. You're just running around picking up gambit motes and just kind of depositing them, and it's the same thing in every single main encounter. I honestly wouldn't mind this so much if the cube encounter didn't just seem to take forever. Oh my gosh, this encounter takes so long, especially if you have a mote spawn on the ceiling. Then you just want to maybe off yourself there. But the Rainbow Road section really lifts this up. Honestly, if that section and the visuals weren't really good in this dungeon, I would actually put this at the bottom spot. But because the visuals are just so good, it carries it slightly above Duality. The solo flawless also wasn't as egregious. It did take me, I would say this is probably the second longest solo flawless that it took me in terms of attempts wise, but nowhere near as egregious as Duality. But yeah, Prophecy coming in at the number 5 spot. Coming out in the number 4 spot, this has got to be Grasp of Avarice. It's very easy, it's very fun, but my problem is that the repeated runs can take a really long time. Especially since Grasp of Avarice, it seems like this gravitates to a lot of new players, so if you don't have your clan running with you, you're just running with LFGs, this can take a really long time as well, especially with that ball encounter, where you have to shoot the balls at the middle section, out of the cannon type thing. It's a very cool idea, but I think it just takes way too long in my opinion. I think if every single servitor spawned at the same time so you could spread out the players, I think that would be a lot better and a lot faster, that sort of thing. So on solo, it still would take a while, but if you had co-op, it would take a lot less time. So what really carries this dungeon for me is the first time player experience. If you guys have played this at all, you know that this dungeon is hilarious to run blindly. At least in my opinion, I love taking new players through this dungeon. It's hilarious seeing them figure everything out in terms of all the booby traps and all that. I really enjoyed it. And, you know, Grasp of Avarice, I think it's just kind of a middle of the road dungeon. I'm not saying it's nowhere near as bad as Prophecy or Duality. It's kind of in that, like, that middle tier of dungeon in my opinion. I also really love the soundtrack and that Sparrow chase. Both of those really elevate the dungeon for me in my opinion. So coming down into the number 3 spot, we have Spire of the Watcher. Now, I'm not sure if this is still the honeymoon period for me, but Spire of the Watcher, in my opinion, is very quick and fun. It only takes like 30 minutes if you're really hauling, maybe even 20 if you're really going. The final boss isn't tedious. The environments are kind of fun, especially with the open jumping puzzle, like right before the first encounter. I think that's really cool. And what I really love is the loot. This is the first time I've really like gravitated towards the loot loadout with the cowboy hat and the wanted title. I think it's all really cool. There's some good weapons from here as well. So this, I know loot wasn't really a factor in my criteria, but I think it's just because it's that good that it really elevates it for me. The visual aesthetic is kind of average, you know, it's just kind of that Martian, whatever, red sand, but I think once you get into the actual between the first and second boss, that area, I think that's pretty cool. And I also like the area right before the first encounter as well, because it kind of reminds me of Portal in a way, like that sort of aesthetic. And I really like that. So yeah, Spire of the Watcher coming down in the number 3 spot because it's really quick and it's not that tedious. You can just blitz through it if you really have a good team. So coming down in the number 2 spot, we have the Shattered Throne. So the Shattered Throne is really good in terms of the environment. I just wish the color scheme wasn't that bad. Like, I really love and using my imagination to imagine what the environments look like without the black and white color scheme, which I think is kind of what they were going for. So if you kind of think of Shattered Throne in that aspect, like what would this look like in the normal world, then your imagination kind of really runs wild and you really enjoy it. It's really quick because of how overpowered we are, so it's not really that challenging. It's just like going on an adventure. But the Ascended Plane still just kind of wears on me a little bit. And it is kind of on the longer side, but I feel like it's just longer because of how huge it is. You really feel like you're like when you see where you start and where you end, you really feel that length. But in terms of time, it's not that bad. The solo flawless, again, in this day and age is pretty easy. It's just kind of time consuming. And then the encounter diversity is this probably is the most diverse encounter. I know it's just going around killing things like in different areas, and then that's the first encounter, and then the second encounter you're just going around killing wizards, and then just instant nuking the boss, and then the third one is just nuking the knights and then nuking the wizard. But I feel like the spaces in between really make up for that, and there's a lot of interesting secret encounters which are not on the main path, but if you're doing the Wish Under quest, you are going through those secret areas, and those are really cool. I always kind of forget about them, but then I look at this door and I'm like, oh yeah, isn't that where this thing is? That's pretty cool. I wish more dungeons did that, where there's secret paths. Right now, most of the main dungeons just kind of feel like you just go straight and there's not a lot of side things, a lot of side secrets, that sort of thing. But I think Shattered Throne, I think it did it the best. But that does mean we do have a number 1 spot. So the number 1 best dungeon, in my opinion, I think it's Pit of Heresy. Now, Pit of Heresy, I think it has the best diversity in mechanics, and it has one of the better aesthetics of the dungeon. And the pacing feels perfect. So I really love that first encounter where it's just where I've always wondered what a vertical encounter space would look like, and I got my answer in Pit of Heresy. I think it's pretty cool. I would like to see a boss in this kind of vertical space. Like a boss is out in the empty void, and you are hugging this wall the entire time. I think that would be a really cool raid encounter. I think that would be perfect. But all the encounters are very fun in general, and the first encounter has some sword mechanics, but then when you get to the ogre room, you're just evading all these ogres, and it feels really intense. And then you get to the second main encounter, and that is just keeping the Annihilator Totem happy, that sort of thing. So it's very diverse. You had ogres, avoiding ogres kind of being stealth, and then you went to keeping this thing happy and having a lot of ad clear, and then you go to the next one, and this is a very intense jumping puzzle because it's very intimidating with all the spikes and all the endless void pit traps and all that stuff. So, and then it all kind of comes together with the final boss. So that's perfect. I love that sort of diversity in a dungeon where every little part feels a little bit different. You know, I love that sort of feeling, and it all helps because it all looks really good. You know, the Solo Flawless, I think, has the perfect challenge of Solo Flawless. It's not too insanely difficult if you have a good loadout, but it did take me quite a few tries, which I feel once you got past that Annihilator Totem encounter, I think that was like, you kind of beat the hardest part of that dungeon. So yeah, Pit of Heresy, in my opinion, #1 best dungeon. Let me know what you guys think. I know I'm probably going to get a lot of dislikes for this because, oh no, you're wrong, this is Duality's the best team. No, shut up. So, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.